Alrighty, here goes nothing. I hope audio is good, and I hope this video turns out. Um, so this is gonna be my typing video. I am just gonna give it a shot. I kind of not so sure. Oh, that was my cat. Um, I'm not really gonna follow like the questions that they gave because a lot of the questions seemed like I didn't have so much to talk about them, and then other questions seemed really good. So I'm just gonna kind of tell my story. I feel like that's probably what they really want. It's just maybe I'm not sure. Um, and then this video think is gonna probably be the one I put uh, for the community as well for them to try and type. But for Dave and Shan, I recorded a series of videos similar to this about 4 years ago, which I'll probably add some of those so you can see me now and see me 4 years ago. Because there's some things that I said in the video 4 years ago which have happened now. So we can see kind of like how I looked at the thing and then how I am now after the thing happening, right? So maybe that could be interesting. So first off, like I guess I want to talk about who I am, and I feel like that's probably what is good in typing. I like talking about myself, and I can do it very comfortably. Though I don't know, no, that's not so accurate either. Anyway, I don't know. Let's just get started. So I was homeschooled. I grew up in a small town in Nebraska. My family um, uh, was and is very Christian, like sort of Southern Baptist, like very like the Bible is the Bible, right? And I grew up in that environment until I finished high school. And when I was in that environment, I was very much like I was very congruent with it. I really like took it in, um, and so I took my own behavior very seriously. I was very I felt that I took religion more seriously than the people around me. I like obviously we'd be going to church every Sunday, and there was like a youth group on Wednesday nights, but I I really believed it very firmly, and so I was really sort of pushing for like, well, if this is true, like if this is how the world is, then we really shouldn't just be going to church. Like we should be going out and talking to people, and we should be, you know, helping people understand where they're going and how to, you know, how to go to heaven, all that stuff. And um so I kind of like I don't know, I like believed it really confidently and really certainly. And I also like took it very seriously as a child, like even though I was like I think like as a kid I didn't really rebel against authority very much at all because I really thought that authority, you know, like my parents or anyone older than me, um, must inherently have more experience and more knowledge than I do. And so it was my responsibility as a child to basically follow what they said. So even if I wanted something, I wouldn't really fight them on it. I would kind of say I wanted it, and then if they say no, then I'd be like, okay, I'm not gonna like fight them and like try to get that thing, because if they said no, that means they think it's better if I don't have it. And if I fight them on it or if I push them against it, maybe I'll get it when it's not what I should have, right? And so I was very like I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make sure that I was following what they thought was the best path for me as well as I could. And like an example of that would be like I ended up not getting a phone until I was like 18 because like my brother got an iPad when he was 14, and so when I was 14 I was like, oh hey, so do you think I could get like a phone or something, a piece of technology? And they were like, well, it's probably better if you don't. And I was like, okay, And it's like that was it for 4 years. And then 4 years later, I was just like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna do it now. I'm 18. Yeah, I am ready. So I did, and I just like bought one with my own money, and I kind of was like, well, I think I can get one now, right? And they were like, I mean, they were kind of like, yeah, it's probably fine. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm doing it. So yeah, that was weird. Um, but yeah, so one of the things with like the religion thing was that I got a lot of opportunities when I was young because uh, one of the churches that we were going to basically kind of had that same sort of thinking where it's really important to go out and talk to people. I did get that experience when I was young of going out on the streets and just sort of like having conversations with people, and that was honestly, I think that was like a really good thing because I got to see not only what other people think, like just random people, what do they actually think about God and the Bible and all this stuff that I had sort of come to such strong conclusions on already, but I also got to see how other people in my own church talked to people, and I was really stunned by that part. That actually was what surprised me more than anything, was seeing other people from my church when they're talking to people and like being astonished by how much they were not listening, and just being like they were literally like they weren't really being preachy, but they were being preachy. And I was like even though I believed that, I was like, okay, like this friend of mine or this pastor or whoever it was, I was like, okay, this person from my church, I agree with what they're saying, but why is it that they are not speaking in a convincing manner? Why are they not actually listening to what the other person is saying and then giving the correct sort of like a good response to what the other person is actually saying? Why are they sort of like first of all not listening, and second of all sort of beating a dead horse, saying the same thing over and over again when the person is obviously hung up on a different part of this whole God thing? And so that was really confusing to me. And then for me personally, I found that I would have this like I have this really strong idea inside my head, or like whatever I'm thinking about, like, okay, this is how you convert someone, like this is the truth because blah blah blah. And like I would always think through that. I would at nights before I'm going to sleep, I would always think about like religion and atheism and Islam and all these different religions, and I think about like how you can see which one is true, and like, okay, so it's this one, right? It's this one. I know it's this one, the one that I had, right? My Christianity. And then I'd go out into the streets and I have this thing inside of me, and then I'd go to the person, and I'd be like, so have you so what do you think about Jesus? Or like, it's not how you start. You start by like, hey, do you have a second to talk? That's how you start, and then you say, well, I just wanted to know what you think about Jesus, or if you've heard of Jesus Christ. And then you kind of start it, right? That was really hard for me. Like, obviously, probably for any kid, it's hard. But it was also really cool because I learned how to talk to people. Because you learn that there's just like a few things you say. You're just like, excuse me, do you have a moment to talk? And they say no, and you're like, okay. And you just keep walking. And they say yes, and you're like, okay, great. And there were some really good conversations. Like if you go to a park, there's this guy who's like topless, laying down on a blanket, like doing these crazy drawings with like charcoal pencil on these giant pieces of parchment paper. And I just walked up to him and was like, hey, do you have a minute to talk? And he was like, sure. And we got like a really interesting conversation. So, there's some people where you get some really good stuff. But those good conversations you get, though, you don't get those if you're like preachy, you know? And the other thing is that when I found like I had this really strong idea of what I was going to say to people, or like a really strong understanding of like what is true, what is not true, the whole list of arguments that, brings you to Christianity, I would come to the person, and when I would talk to them, they would immediately give me something else that I wasn't expecting and that didn't really fit in. And so then I kind of had to, I couldn't really present what I wanted to present or what I had prepared. I had to just sort of talk to the person. And I think that probably ended up as a good thing because I didn't really get into confrontational interactions with people, because if I'm just talking to a person, like obviously I'm going to listen to what they say and then respond to what they're saying. And if it doesn't really like tie into like this huge point that I want to try to make, then I'm like, well, whatever. So I don't know. I think it was a good experience. Um, but it also started to show me that like it was just weird to see people sort of like preaching at other people instead of listening. And that was also something that I noticed Like I noticed it just growing up, like when people are like I would notice it inside of my family, like my mom and dad talking to each other. Like they have a great relationship as a couple, but like just at the dinner table, I would notice them talking past each other, and it was just why? Like why? I don't understand. Like that seems so difficult. Like, and I would see it, and to me, it looked like what they were doing was so hard, and I could see that it was hard for both of them. And it was like, well, it looks like it's hard because you're talking past each other, but neither one of you see that you're talking past each other. Yet you still make it work, even though you are talking past each other, which is impressive. But it was just like, it was just confusing. It was like, what is that? Um, and then yeah, so that was growing up. What else? I Yeah, I grew up like that. That was how I grew up. And then went off to school. Oh, high school was another time that was really good. High school, I really enjoyed high school because like I was homeschooled, but then when I got to high school, the curriculum became more weird. Like my brother was homeschooled all the way through high school, and then my sister was homeschooled up until like some level of junior high, and then switched. And then I was in the middle. So for me, high school was like three different things. It was like part of it was self-directed, where I just had the books and I just sort of went through them on my own, which was great. Part of it was at the church we were going to because they had a tiny, tiny, tiny Christian school there, and it was like there were literally three people in my class for the second year or first year. I don't remember which year. There were literally like three people in my class one year, like five the next, and then like three the last, or something like that. So it was tiny, tiny, tiny. And then I took some classes at a community college, like some math classes. And so high school was great. I really, really, really enjoyed high school. And even now, looking back in my life, I think that high school was probably the happiest I've ever been. It just felt perfect in a lot of ways. Uh, in high school, um, I feel almost that high school was sort of a way, a place where I started to rebel a little bit. Like I mentioned, how I really followed my parents pretty accurately and pretty exactly. And in high school, I kind of pushed back, but in a very probably passive aggressive way, because I was like, okay, I wanna finish high school faster. I don't want to be around here for so much longer under the thumb of authority for so long. So I wanted to finish it early, and it was kind of the perfect choice for me, or to me, it seemed like the perfect choice because there was like a rule that I could not, I could have like 2 hours of computer time every day, and so I was like, well, if the only thing I really want to be doing is like playing games on the computer, and I can only do it for 2 hours a day, then I might as well like fill up the rest of the day with schoolwork. And so that's literally what I did. I was like, okay, I'll finish high school a year early. I'll do it in 3 years instead of four. And my dad was really supportive of that because I mean, he always identified a lot with being smart, and he like he was kind of like he was definitely happy with me sort of doing something to be like, yeah, I'm smart. And he had fun kind of like bragging on me a little bit. And he was like, yeah, he's finishing in 3 years. So that was kind of cool. And that was fun. Um, and yeah, so it worked out. It was a great thing because like I got what I wanted. My dad got what he wanted. You know, it was, it was good. Um, and I did well. So it was like, so yeah, so the 3 years of high school were like pretty much, there were a lot of days where I was just doing, like, I would just do homework pretty much all day and then studying all day. And that was just it. And those days felt really great because, like, I don't know, I got into like a rhythm. And like, I really, for like those years, it felt really gratifying. It felt really good. And I don't really know the details of exactly why it felt so good. I think it was because I was working a lot, like on school. I was doing a lot of school, and I just feel better if I'm doing something productive. I was doing well, like I was getting good grades and everything, and I was being very responsible. I wasn't letting things slip, like I was taking care of all the things. And also I got time with peers and was spending time with peers at class, even if it was only like I had two classmates. But it was really great. Like I really enjoyed it. Um, so in a way, I basically got more social time than I had ever gotten, while also working harder than I had ever worked, and getting more like sort of validation from people because like I was interacting in with school where I had a teacher. Like the teacher asked me things and I answer the things, and they're like, "Wow, good job." Or like, "Yeah, that's right." And it feels so good when someone asks you a question and you have the answer and you get it right. And some of those moments were really special to me that happened in high school. Like I'll still point to one of those times where it was like we were learning something in chemistry where you have to deal with the basically just like the reactions between different elements, and you're like mixing fluids together. And I remember that it was like a new concept or whatever, and so they gave us like the first problem, and they were like, "Well, read the chapter." And I think our teacher was working on something else, and so she wasn't really like prepared for that specific lesson because um, she was teaching 7th through 12th grade in one room. So there was this giant room with like yeah. So there was the ninth through 12th. Now ninth through 12th was just a table with three of us, right? And we were all the same grade. So that doesn't really count as like, but she did it. So it was really just two classes, and one of them was like 7th and 8th, and then the other one was the high school, which was just three of us. But she would go back and forth. So she would like teach a little bit on one side. They would sort of, and then like give them their assignment. They start working on their assignment. Then she comes over here and she's like, "Okay, so let's work on this chemistry. How is that going?" Right. So she was doing a lot. And she was also the administrator of the school. And yeah, she was like doing a lot, a lot, a lot. But she was great. She was a great, great person. It was great to interact with her. But there was one time where we were learning something new, and it was a fun experience for me because like they basically were just like gave us the book, and like I'm used to working with just the book, so it was fine. But for my classmates, that was kind of hard because they're like, "What? There's a new concept and I have to learn it just from reading what?" But for me, it was easy because I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm used to doing this. You just read the book and then you just like do the thing." And but the thing was, then I got to the problem and I was like, "Oh wait, this is actually new and this is actually kind of hard." So then I kind of like was like, and but I like I got the thing was that I got it right. It wasn't easy to get right, but I did get it right. And so then when our teacher came back, she was like, "All right, so how was it?" And I was like, and I was kind of quiet at first, and people were talking, and they were like, "Well, it's kind of hard and whatever, and I don't understand." And the teacher was like, "Okay, well, let's go to the board. I'll solve it." And I was like, "Wait, I'm just curious. Is the answer 117 moles?" And she was like, she checked, and she was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Okay, let's go." And then we got to the whiteboard, and she started to explain the concept, and she basically got stuck. She basically like went through it and got the wrong answer. And then she was like, "Okay, well, you got it right, so you do it," right? Like kind of jokingly. And then I tried to go up, and I kind of went up there, and then I was like, "Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap," because like I like thought about it, I figured out how everything was connected to itself, and I got the answer, but I didn't remember exactly how the equation looked. And that's been a problem with me for math for a long time, is that I'm really good at intuitively understanding like a problem. Like if you give me a word problem and it's all in words, I can just solve it. I'll just figure it out somehow. But like I don't know the exact equation where I could just plug all those numbers in and just get this solution without thinking about it. And so even though I had solved the problem, I didn't remember how I had solved it. And so then I got up on the board and I was like stammering and like trying. And I was like, mm-hmm. And I was like, "Well, I know you multiply this number by this number, and then you multiply this number by this number, and then you multiply this number by this number, and you get the answer." But they were like all disconnected, right? They weren't connected into the equation. And so it was like, they were like, "What? What?" They like didn't really, it's like they don't really believe you when you don't have the pattern, I guess. And that's something. Now it's weird because I'm I remember that moment a lot because I'm really proud of myself for like getting it. But then I think back to it and I think that seems to be a pattern because that's something I that comes up in my life more because I think I feel as if like other people look at me with a lot of skepticism. Like I feel like when I say things, people are like, well, I mean, probably no. I feel like they feel that way when I speak about something or when I present something. And I don't know, that's kind of it's a little bit annoying. But then my response to that has been like to just sort of like leave or not worry about it, not worry about like trying to convince people of things or not trying to like change people's opinions and just kind of do my own thing. And that seems to be good. Um, um, so that seems to be good. Um, and I don't know, like I've had the same experience with like on that on that realm. It seems like a thing where like if you push on people and they're skeptical or they don't want to change, it feels like they're kind of like a person is sort of like Oobleck, where like that's something I believe very strongly is that people are like Oobleck, and like if you push on them with a lot of force, they harden and they become immovable. But if you push gently, they just they're like they're like nothing. They just let you through. And so I assume that if people look at me with skepticism or if I feel skepticism, I must be pushing hard, right? Because if I'm feeling that resistance, it must be that I'm pushing hard, which is probably true. Like, I'm probably presenting myself right now very soft and like kind of chill, but I think I'm pretty sure actually that I have a very aggressive side to me too, because I feel that my personality is sort of split in two where I have one side of me that is very open and uh, flexible and spontaneous, and all sort of all the buzzwords you could think of for flexible. And then I feel like the other half of me is just like the exact opposite, like a lot of like stubbornness, a lot of narrowness, a lot of forcefulness and pushiness, and it feels to me as if I can only do one side or the other side. It doesn't really feel like I can balance those two sides. And that's a little weird because I've been in personality circles for a long time, and I've been listening to OPS for a long time and watching YouTube videos for a long time. But what I'm really experiencing is something that's more binary, and like I would expect it to be something like that I could tie to like lead consume or like demon blast or something like that, but it feels really binary. It feels really 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 binary. So what I'm actually experiencing seems very binary, and the best guess I have right now is that it's some combination of I have my feminine functions sort of lined up with my animal stack, which is probably true. Basically what I mean by that is I probably, if my whatever my first two animals are, they are probably the lead one is probably double feminine or double masculine, and whatever my last animal is, it's probably double feminine or double masculine. So that's kind of the thing, right? I think my lead animal and my demon animal are probably both double masculine, um, or something along those lines, something close to that, right? Or even if it's not double masculine, it's got a masculine in there somewhere, or in a feminine. But probably double masculine because it's really strong. It's like a really strong thing. It's like when I'm nice, I'm like a fucking doormat, and I'm just like nothing. And when I'm standing up for myself, there's just zero budge room whatsoever. You have no chance of getting a single extra dotted I into whatever I'm saying. I'm like, nope, that's it. So like the amount of stubbornness is insane, and the amount of openness is also insane. And so that's really difficult for me. Like, yeah, like it's difficult for the people around me too, because I mean, obviously, that's not fun to deal with. Um, yeah. Um, I guess we're getting kind of close to type now, but before we get to type, I want to talk a little bit about uh, kind of my projects I've been working on lately. Uh, in high school, yeah, we're gonna switch off because I'm not gonna talk about college because college was for me. It was like did 2 years of college, dropped out. It was music composition, and I basically dropped out. Um, in college, oh yeah, no, I should talk about college. In college, like when I finally got out of the house, that's when I started processing um, if I really am a Christian. And so I went through that. So the first 2 years of college, even though I was in college, really what I was doing more than anything was just processing what I believed. And after a year and a half or so, I basically was like, yeah, I guess I'm an atheist because, yeah. And it was like, it's another one of those things, right? The whole religion thing is exactly the same as what happened with the equation in high school. It was like, I was alone. I was watching 2 or 3 hour long debates between atheists and Christians. Um, I was watching like 3 hour long like presentations from one side, from the other side, and I was just deep in it. I don't know how how much content I went through, but it was an insane amount. I was reading books, I was watching debates. It was crazy. It was really crazy. It was like very intensive, like about 2 years of going through literally everything. And by the end of it all, it came down to basically what I took away from it. Like, I took away from it that I was an atheist, right? Which, after a couple years, has turned into more of a deist. But I don't like the word deist because you say deist and people think uh, you think you believe in God, like what they think God is. So I just say atheist, even though that's not technically true. But it's like you have to get the point. Like I know there's no God. Okay, so I have to say atheist, even though Einstein's God or like deism actually fits, but people don't understand that. So I just have to say atheist. Um, but yeah, it was the same thing where like I sort of like hunkered down and I processed everything, and then I came out with the answer. There is no God, and I couldn't explain that to anyone. If I it would be me at the whiteboard at school, like being like, well, I know you multiply these two numbers and then you multiply these two numbers and then you multiply these two numbers, and that's the answer. There's no God. But they'd be like, what do you mean? How do you know to multiply those? And I'm like, well, I just know. I mean, I just like, you just check all the things and that's the result. um and it's just, there's not like a framework, I guess. So I guess there's like a lack of a framework. It could be interesting. I can't help but hear type speak as I'm talking. And it's a little weird to hear me say certain things that I didn't really expect to say. But hey, I'm just saying. Whatever. So, um, yeah, so basically became kind of an atheist. But really, the main thing I learned from going through all that stuff with religion was not actually what I believed, because I think of it as like the real thing that I took away was certainty, as some sort of spectrum of certainty. And basically that over here I believe in God with so much certainty, and then the thing that I did not do was just switch over to I now believe in atheism with the same amount of certainty. The thing I actually learned was to drop my certainty down and say, and basically be comfortable not knowing, and being comfortable with ambiguity, and basically saying, okay, sure, you could point to some sort of supernatural occurrence or some sort of thing that you felt was a spirit, or some thing that you think was your dead father talking to you. Yeah, you can do that. You can say that. That's something that I might not be comfortable with, but you could probably sort of like present some evidence and make it seem fairly plausible that that thing actually happened, whatever it was. But you can't draw a line or a connection from that, whatever that actual event was, to then saying, therefore, Jesus Christ, born in Nazareth, was actually Jesus Christ. Like, that's huge, 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 huge leap, right? And so it's just like realizing that like this whole structure that people have in their minds, or this whole structure that has been created, which is religion, is actually composed of other smaller parts, and those parts are not as close to each other as it seems, or it might seem to some people. They're actually really far apart, and you notice that when you talk to people, because someone who believes that particular religion has the parts organized in this particular way, and they're all like close together, and they go from one to the other to the other to the other, and it's so simple. And they're like, well, this is so obvious, this is so true. But then if you talk to someone who's from a different religion, they'll still have those same parts, they'll still get to those same things, but they take this meandering path. They're like, it's not next to each other, they're like way far away, and there's like this long windy path. And like, if you talk to someone and you start out, you find something, they say something, and they say that thing, they get that there's that idea there, whatever it is. Like, maybe it's like there's something supernatural going on. Okay, they get that, they totally get that. But then they connect it immediately to Vishnu, and you're like, oh, okay, well, what's Vishnu? And then you sort of trace this line as they're describing what Vishnu is, and you can connect it to other concepts. You can say, oh, that's kind of like Jesus, and then, well, that's a little bit like God, and then, well, this other one is a little bit like what Buddhism is. And what you end up seeing is basically that what people have in their minds is not the truth. It's just a framework they use to interpret reality, and that's it. So that's kind of the thing I became comfortable with, I think, is just sort of like, I don't have such a giant clump of concepts that are all linked together really closely. They're more like floating, and they're separated, and I can be like, oh yeah, I mean, I don't really think miracles happen, but I can see that, that makes sense, okay, that's a little interesting, yeah, wow, wow, she had cancer and then she didn't have cancer after you prayed. Pop, I mean, that's great, that's fantastic. And then it's like, okay, so then why didn't you believe in God? And it's like, well, why does praying and someone getting healed of cancer have anything to do with God? Because there's a huge leap. There's a giant, giant, giant leap, and it's just like, just don't make those leaps. Just look at what is, and that's it. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm actually like that, or if I'm just like that with one thing. I don't know if I have to do that same level of processing to get that level of openness, or if I actually sort of learned the lesson. So we'll see. But I'm starting to get a little bored. I'm not being very interesting. What's an interesting thing to talk about? Well, I was gonna talk about my projects. Oh yeah, those are kind of interesting. Um, so in senior year of high school, I uh, started getting interested in AI, which was like 4 or 5 years ago now. And so I wrote a research paper on AI, and that was fun. But ever since then, it's always been something in the back of my mind. And I've noticed recently with how popular it's gotten in the most recent years that I think about it in a lot different way, in a much different way than like the popular way of thinking about it is. Because for me, what I feel like there's sort of like two sides to it. Like, there's one side of it where there's a black box that you just put stuff in and you get answers out, and you don't really know what's inside of that box or what the box does, other than the fact that it somehow gets things right. The black box is basically a neural network, and that's cool, but that's not cool to me. What's cool to me is um, the more, I wouldn't call it artificial intelligence. I would call it like explicit intelligence, and explicit in the sense of like exact, right? Um, because what's cool to me is the fact that if you're aware of what is happening inside of your mind, if you're aware of how you process things, then you can allow a computer to do the same thing that you're doing. And I feel very aware of whatever is going on in my head. And so over the years I've been trying to learn programming slowly, just so that I can get what's happening in my head out of my head into the computer and just use it as an extension of myself. And that's a very different thing than what the sort of the well-trod path of AI is right now. But for me, that's like what's cool about it is it's basically expanding myself. I'm literally growing. I'm literally taking some thought process which is really unique to me that I could tell to a person and they wouldn't really do anything with it or think of it as interesting or kind of like try it out. But if I tell it to a computer, then of course it's going to do it. And so I don't know what that is, but that's what I like about computers and that's what I like about programming is basically being able to tell it what to do and it does it and not have any of that friction that you would normally have. Um, so yeah, but in my personal life, I think I have been learning to put more force on people, and that's been interesting because that's really I find that really annoying, um, because when you put force on people, and maybe this isn't true of all people, but it feels like you have to put force. You have to say the same thing over and over, and that's annoying to me. I would rather like say the thing and then move on to the next thing, and it's very like annoying for me to say the same thing over and over and over. I think everyone doesn't everyone hate that though. Like maybe it's just the specific people I'm around. I don't know. Okay, that's probably enough. I haven't re- nothing really interesting has happened. I don't think. Um, I might post one video from me 4 years ago, or a couple. I don't know. There were like 8 or 9 of them, and of varying lengths. I might post one of them as well in the Discord because that will get me from 4 years ago, back when I didn't have long hair. Um, and I also, oh yeah, okay. I've I probably need to skip over, or not skip over, but skim over. Okay, this is a difficult thing. The last few years of my life are not resolved, and don't really understand where they're going, what they are. I haven't really processed them. Just a lot of craziness has happened, and I really don't know how to talk about it. But I know that it should be a good way of typing someone is when they're talking about something that's unresolved. Um, so I should try to tell you about the last few years. So I mentioned I dropped out of college after 2 years. That was because oh yeah, I haven't talked about anything related to love. Oh gosh, wow, that's a huge oversight. Okay, context for love for Josh. What is Josh's love life like? Um, no, more like what is Josh's heart like? Because it's not just love; it's also friendships. They're the same thing. Oh yeah, I haven't said anything. I am so dumb. This is a terrible typing video, isn't it? Because I haven't mentioned. I should go back to those stupid questions, shouldn't I? No, it's fine. I'll get around to it. Okay, so my relationship with friends. Uh, Growing up in church and stuff, there was only one person that I really liked, or yeah, one person, and we had really good conversations. I really loved talking to him, and we had really good conversations. We would just talk about like the universe and sort of solve the world's problems and talk about how things were and mysteries and science and all that stuff. And it was really fun. I really loved talking to him. And then when I was like 13 or 14, we switched churches, And basically, long story short, I found out that even though he was my best friend, I was not his best friend. That was like really, really hard for me. And I went about that whole entire situation the completely wrong way, because I sort of, uh, I was like very strongly, I felt very strongly about the whole thing. And I was like, man, like, I'm always initiating to make sure that we hang out, and he never really initiates. And does he really even care about it, hanging out? He probably doesn't, but I care about it, so I have to do something. And so anyway, like basically we switched churches, and my solution was to write him a letter. And so I wrote him a letter and mailed it. And now I realize that I made a huge mistake there, because what ended up happening, and I didn't find this out until years later, but he didn't get the letter. But I didn't know didn't get the letter until years later, and so that was really bad. Um, so I started looping and spiraling into this whole thing of like, oh, he doesn't care about me. And it's really weird, because I know I got really sad about that, and really like feeling like alone, and like no one cared about me and all that. And it's really weird, because like it's kind of true, right? Because like he really didn't really care about me, you know. But I don't know. I see how I could have dealt with the situation better now. Like I realized that, like, for one thing, I shouldn't have written one letter. Like, I did think about writing multiple letters, but I just felt like that would be cringy to be sending multiple letters. But it's like, well, if you just send two, I mean, that's not so bad. You know, you wait a week and send another one. I mean, you were talking to this person like every Sunday. Like, that's not weird. That's okay. But I just didn't know, or it didn't feel right or something. But then the other mistake I made was that I kind of put all my energy into that one. And it's like, it would have been better to just put like tiny, tiny, tiny amount of energy. It's just supposed to keep a connection there. It doesn't matter. Like, don't say anything big. Just put like tiny, tiny, tiny amount of energy. Just be like, hey, how was your week? We're going to this new church, and the pastor just talks funny. He sounds like so and so. Ha ha ha. Send it. Like, that's how you do social interaction. But I didn't know that at the time. So yeah, so I messed up, right? Um, because yeah, if you send some stupid letter like that, sure, you can send that like every couple of weeks, and eventually he's gonna get one and he'll reply, and then the connection's still there. So yeah, just really dumb mistake for me, which I can look back and recognize as a dumb mistake. But it wasn't. It's something I like cried about for like 7 years. Like, every night I would go to bed and I'd cry and I'd be like, oh, like, no one loves me, or no one cares about me, and no one will understand me, and no one wants to be my friend, and you know. So yeah. And actually, that's interesting, because I'm catching myself getting to the same thing again right now. And I'm like, no, didn't been there, done that. What do I have to do? I have to learn the lessons, right? Smaller pieces of thing, smaller things to keep the connection alive, not these huge giant things that of course you're going to get let down on. Like, of course, if you just like open up your heart and like dump a book on someone, they're going to let you down, because no one can just respond to that in like a good way. You've got to put like some tiny little thing like, oh, let's go get ice cream, ha ha ha. Send that out there, then you'll get a good response. You say something serious and deep, and they're gonna be like, and then you're gonna feel all those things. So yeah, that's been a thing. um I don't remember where I was going with this. Oh yeah, I wanted to talk about friends, because I wanted to talk about college, because I wanted to talk about my projects, but I talked about my projects. But because I wanted to talk about love life, because in college is when I met my wife. So I had never really talked to girls growing up. Um, and I think by the time I was like 18, I think I had like two crushes in my life. I'm just like, that's been like a very small part of my life. And then when I was like 20 or so, is when I started to, or maybe 19, it was somewhere in there, where basically I was processing all of the pain from losing my best friend, who I wasn't his best friend, and if I just realized that sooner, it would have been so much better. I should have known. It was obvious, but anyway, whatever. So, um, so I was processing all of that, and I was also at college, and so I was like hanging out with people at college, but I was noticing that I wasn't really getting something that I wanted from the friends at college, and I was basically came to the conclusion that what I need is a wife, because I need someone who really does care about me and really will spend the rest of their life with me, because it's ridiculous to think that your best friend from when you're 12 is gonna like be your friend for the rest of your life. That would be awesome, and that would be exactly what I want, but it's just a little ridiculous. But a wife, I mean, if you have a wife, there's a much higher chance of your wife spending more time with you. And maybe that's not actually true. Probably friends probably stick around more than wives do, which I'm starting to maybe start to understand. But at least the goal with spouses is that they stick around for longer. Um, so um, so yeah, so that was basically my solution. What I came to the conclusion of was I need a wife, and that's part of why I actually dropped out of school. Like, I don't know, I maybe would have dropped out anyway, I'm not sure, but like it made a lot of sense because I had met my wife. um and my process with that was basically I just started talking to people, because I was like, okay, if I feel lonely, I'm just going to feel this way forever unless I do something to change it, because obviously like people aren't going to come, like, what are people going to do, are people going to start stuff with me? No, they're not. I mean, I don't let people start things with me, because I'm always in my own world. I'm always doing my own stuff. I'm very like rigid in like the things I do. It's probably the masculine side of me is like the things I do, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to the store. I go to the store, I buy the things, I come home, 15-minute store run. I'm not the person who's like going to the store and then like they're buying like six things and they're like, oh, we need this other thing and this other thing, and they spend like 4 hours like walking around town. Like, I don't do that. And of course, like that 4 hours walking around town is going to be the time when you meet people and you see people and maybe people talk to you, right? So that's just the thing, is that people have no opportunity to talk to me because I just like go out, come back, go out, come back. It's just like very much like that. Even at like college, the only reason I really talked to people and did things was because of my roommates. Because I was like, well, I go to class, then I come home, and then I study, and then I go to eat lunch, and then I come home, and then I study. And it's like the only thing pulling me out of that was my roommates, because like, oh, my roommates are like, let's go this way, and I'm like, well, okay, they're literally like in the dorm with me. But if I didn't have roommates, I wouldn't have done anything interesting in college. I would have literally just gone to class. And of course, I would have felt lonely and, had this loneliness thing, of course, because obviously anyone who doesn't talk to people is going to feel lonely. But, um, yeah, so my approach, now I didn't really talk to people in real life. My approach was I got like a dating app that had personalities. It was based on personalities. You like put in your personality and then boom, you would match, and you would see the picture, but you would also see their personality. So you're like, this is an ESFP. This is an ENTP. This is a INTP. You know, you get to judge people based on 4 letters instead of their face, which is great. so, so that was kind of fun. Yeah, and so I like talked to a bunch of girls on there, and I think I kind of surprised myself, because I think, like, going back to earlier, like that feminine side of me, or I call it feminine, but like the feminine side of me where it's like really flexible and spontaneous and all that. I found out that I think that side of me gets along really well with people, which is great, because I never really thought of myself as getting along well with people, but I guess I did. And so that was great. When I downloaded that app, I got a lot of like there were a lot of like pretty good conversations, and then I was feeling a lot pretty good about them. Um, but then they were also kind of all a little bit shallow, and so like when I ended up started talking to my wife, she was different from all the others, and I could see that, because she was in MBTI, she's an INTP. In OPS, we think she's something else, but similar to an INTP, that same kind of thing. Um, And so like when we got into that, it was very much like I was kind of like holding off. I was like, well, okay, I have some confidence that I can initiate things and things can go well, but I don't know if I want any sort of commitment with any of these people. And then, you get to these conversations that reminded me of talking to Ben when we were talking about like like she's into chemistry and um like a lot of physics and like quarks and all that type of stuff. And talking about that stuff is just like, oh yes, of course. I mean, obviously, let's get married. Let's talk about this for the rest of our lives. So that's really what made me pursue a relationship with her more seriously. So I dropped out of school, bought tickets to go down to Bolivia. That's where she's from. She spoke English because she went to high school in the U.S., but she was living in Bolivia at the time. And yeah, so we went down. So I went down to Bolivia. We got married like 3 months after meeting, or 3 months after going down to Bolivia. So we met in February, and then I flew down to Bolivia in May, and then we got married 6 months from when we met. So we got married in July, I think. Yes, July. So then we got married in July, and it was exactly to the day, which was great. Days are special for her, so that was cool. It was like the 24th. We met on the 24th of February, and we got married on the 24th of July. So that's cool. We have 2 anniversaries a year instead of one. But yeah, so flew down to Bolivia. We got married. Then I came back to the States to work and save some money for like 3 months, and then I went back down there. And it's only December this year, or November, like Halloween of this year, or last Halloween, I guess technically, that we both got back here. So these last 2 years was like doing paperwork, living in Bolivia, doing paperwork so she could come here, and then living off of my savings, which fortunately in Bolivia you can live on like $100 a month. So savings went really far, which was nice. Yeah, so that was great. And then I don't remember where I was going with this. It was just talking about love, I guess. But yeah, so basically, I guess what I found out is that like having a wife really helps. It's like, I guess it's really the thing that I need. Like one person who's really loyal to me, and one person who really cares about me. And I really do feel like that's all I need, which is nice. Um, and I do feel like if I had just focused on friends, even though it makes more sense, it's definitely like the right choice in my scenario in college would have been to get good friends first, learn how to have friends, and then think about dating and marriage and all that. This was like a shorter path to just get married straight away. And I think that's a pattern for me too, where I can see like what the wise path is, or what the, what you should do, what makes sense, what's logical, or, what statistically has a high chance of success, all that stuff. But I don't really care. I don't really listen to it. In practice, I just do, I just, I figure out where I'm trying to get, and I just beeline. I just do like a straight line towards that thing, and it's faster. Because I don't want to, and that's just a thing. Like I'm very beeline-ish. Like I just like that's because that's what I talked about with going to the store too. It was like I go to the store and I'm like, okay, what do I need? I need milk, eggs, cheese, mayonnaise, whatever. I go to the store, I get those things, I come home. That's it. 15 minutes. It's like people don't take 15 minutes going to the store. They take like an hour. Why do they take an hour? Because they don't know what they need. They can't walk in a straight line. They walk in a circle, and then they're like, oh, what did I need? And then what do I do? And then, oh, got this. And they walk like 5 miles in the supermarket. You don't have to walk 5 miles. You just, like, where's the stuff? You go to one edge, and you just work your way around, and you walk like a few hundred feet. And that's it. And if you forget something, You go, well, I'll get it next week. You know, that's my punishment. I'm not gonna walk all the way back with all this stuff. I'm just gonna go home and be like, darn it, don't have mayonnaise. So, anyway, I don't know. Maybe that's pretty good. We're close to an hour now, so hopefully that's good. I guess I should talk a little bit about type, just because that's a good way to get someone talking. I can talk about OPS a little bit too, and typology in general. You know, something I'm realizing is that I do a lot of processing, and there's just no way for me to say it all because it's been an hour, and I feel like I have said like 0.2%, or maybe like no, I've said more than that. But like, if I were to try to like say all the things I have to say, I feel like it would take like 8 or 9 hours. It would have to be like a series, and I'd have to like break it down into chunks, and like I don't know. There's a lot of stuff up here, and it's just not. It's like no, there's so much. Um, like in Bolivia, while I was down there, uh, I was just writing down the things I've been thinking, and I think I wrote like 300 or 400 pages worth of just thoughts. Um, Now that was in like a year and a half or so, but 300 or 400 pages. So there's a lot. Um, and yeah, so I'm just this thing is always going, and I like to think that the thoughts are high quality, but they're probably not. There's no way that that amount of content can be high quality, but it's something, right? But what was I going to talk about? I was going to talk about something else. Oh yeah, type. So I first got into MBTI when I was like 13 or 14, and I got INTJ. And some people around me were like, yes. And some people around me were like, what? You are not an INTJ. And that was that. And then over the years, I joined different Discords, got into different communities. And I've found actually that personality has been like the most successful way for me to make friends somehow. I don't really understand why. It's an interesting thing for me that like I think it's because it's a shared interest, and I do really well with shared interests. I don't do so well with like fandoms or like pop culture stuff like that. Like for me, it's like when I connect with people, I really want to be like learning something, and with personality, it's really great because you're always learning something because you're trying to understand the human mind, and anyone, literally anyone, can help you. And because no one understands the human mind yet, no one can really say that you shouldn't listen to this person or you can't talk to that person or this person's stupid or this person's smart. No one can say that because no one knows. So that's kind of fun. I feel like I can really get into my sort of my feminine energy. Works really well with personality because I'm just like I'll just go up to talk to people. I'll be like, well, how does your mind work? How do you think about things? What do you do? This is what I do. What do you do? And that's really fun to do. And it's like there's not really any judgment you can do. There's like some people who believe really strongly in one thing that eventually those are the people that you realize are wrong, and they're only wrong because they believe strongly, right? And that's a pattern with the world too. It's like if you find someone who's really confident, like the best, it's really weird. Like the higher their confidence, the higher the chances are that they're wrong. But also, the higher their confidence, the higher their chances of success. So it's like this really weird thing of like, well, if you want to be successful, just be super confident. But you're also going to be wrong, and everyone's going to know you're wrong. So, like look at Tate, Andrew Tate, right? Well, of course he's successful. He's confident. Well, of course everyone knows he's an asshole because he's obviously wrong. So somehow being wrong works in the universe, and that seems like a pattern. That seems like it's because you could even say that that's even what personality is. Like it's distorting your understanding of reality a little bit, and yet somehow it helps us. Like why would distorting reality be something that happens? Like why would that exist? Like it should be so easy to just see reality. Well, maybe reality is boring. Maybe reality is not beautiful. Maybe reality is not interesting. Maybe if you actually saw reality, you would just be not doing anything. Maybe you need a little bit of distortion to feel like, oh, I understand. I have to do this. Maybe that's what you need. And it's like, well, you don't understand, and that's not what you should be doing. But at least it got you off your ass. You're moving now. Maybe that's the point. It really does feel like that could be the point of personality to me. Because I think about that in terms of computers. Because I'm like, okay, the computers see what's real, they're not very motivated. Maybe we need to put in some distortion into how they see things. Maybe we need to let them abstract out a little bit. Maybe we need to understand what an abstraction is, how to create an abstraction. Maybe we need to just let the computer chew on something and come up with some abstractions, and maybe we need to let the computer decide what it's going to think about and all that. So I'm going to pause because I think the lawnmower noise is loud, and when I come back I just have to remember to talk about my type a little bit, but it's an hour already, so I think I should hurry up.